On June 28th, a federal judge in Tennessee, who was appointed by Donald Trump, temporarily blocked portions of a state ban on gender-affirming care for transgender youth. In the nearly 70-page opinion, the judge writes, quote, "Parents have a fundamental right to direct the medical care of their children, which naturally includes the right of parents to request certain medical treatments on behalf of their children. And when considering the irreparable harm that could come to trans youth were the law to go into effect," the judge writes, "each minor plaintiff has submitted a declaration that details the negative consequences they expect to endure as a result of SB 1 becoming effective. These expectations are not mere conjecture, but instead are supported by the medical evidence on the record." So far, 6 different federal judges, including Trump-appointed judges in Indiana and Alabama, have ruled against these bans, either in part or in total. It's a really remarkable string of legal victories for trans rights against an increasingly intense campaign of repression. Chase Strangio is the deputy director for the ACLU's Transgender Justice Division, and he joins me now. First of all, just your reaction, Chase, to the opinion in Indiana, but there's been a series of them in different venues that sound remarkably similar. What's the argument that you're making to federal judges like this judge in Tennessee, and what's the reception been like?
Yeah, so it has been a clear and unanimous rejection of these laws. And when the evidence is tested, which is what we suspected, the judges recognize that there really is no evidence supporting these categorical bans. They are based on ideology opposing trans people, they're based on misinformation, and they're based in politics. We know that this is escalating in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election. And when we go to court and we argue that these laws violate the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause of the Constitution, and put forth medical evidence, including expert witness testimony, the judges are unanimous and clear that these laws just simply do not hold up.
There's something really striking about that I want to just stay on for a moment. You know, I was thinking there's something similar with what happened with the claims of voter fraud and voter irregularities, right? So you've got all these people saying, oh, they're stealing the votes. And then what happens is you go into court and you say, the court asked for evidence. And after 2020, they went 0 for 60, right? They went to a bunch of courts. They said, no, there's no evidence. It is pretty striking that in this area where there has been a lot of coverage and contestation and people saying there's lots of problems with medical care for trans youth, that when they're brought under the rules of evidence into federal courts across the ideological spectrum and across geography, and it is litigated on the facts that every single judge basically has cited with plaintiffs like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And when the other side, when the states defending these laws put forth their purported experts in every single case, the courts have found that these so-called experts are unreliable, inconsistent, and making claims that simply are illogical. And so it is very similar to the voter fraud allegations. It's very similar to the anti-abortion playbook in terms of the rhetoric and the way it's being covered in the media. I will say that at the end of the day, having now been in court in 4 different jurisdictions, we receive a fairer play in front of these federal judges across the country than we do in the center-left media. The New York Times, the pages of the New York Times don't look at the evidence in the ways that we have had these federal judges look at the evidence. When they look at the medical evidence, there is simply nothing supporting these bans other than sensationalized claims and misinformation. And that is really important to understand, because at the core of this are thousands of young people across the country who are about to lose the medical care that they are relying on. And we are falling prey to this campaign of misinformation that is being escalated in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah. And on that point, I had you on our podcast, Why Is This Happening? A few months ago, we were talking about this, right? About this sort of just onslaught of these laws. And one of the things that you and I were discussing, when you talk about irreparable harm, which is the standard to sort of enjoin a law, anyone who's on any kind of medication that they have a prescription to, they need, particularly if you're on SSRIs, which tens of millions of Americans are, including myself, you can't go 3 or 4 days and just get cut off from it. The irreparable harm of a law that just tells people from one day to the next, like, you are cut off from your medication that a doctor, under doctor supervision, has prescribed you, that's something else that is stuck out in these decisions of all these judges recognizing just how unjustifiable and unjustified that would be.
Absolutely. Not just, it would be absolutely catastrophic for the young people, for their parents who would then have to watch them suffer. And the arguments that are put forth as justification for these bans are things like the medication has side effects. I think we can all understand that all medication has potential side effects. Things like they are prescribed off-label. In pediatrics, sometimes as many as 80% of medications are prescribed off-label. Every single justification for these laws is true of so much of medicine that if these justifications were to be credited, then every form of medication, anything could be under assault. And every single judge has recognized that. Anyone who's a parent knows that when your child is suffering, you are doing whatever you can to alleviate that suffering. We have parents who are going into court and bearing their souls, and the judges, thankfully, are hearing them. And what I want now is for the country to hear those parents and these young people who need their medication.
The judge, Eli Richardson in Tennessee, pointed this out, that the sort of consensus that's emerged from these federal courts on these laws, I thought it was interesting. Though the court would not hesitate to be an outlier if it found such an outcome to be required, the court finds it noteworthy that its resolution of the present motion brings it into the ranks of courts that have unanimously come to the same conclusion when considering very similar laws. Chase Strangio, who has had quite a role in this outcome, and the struggle, of course, on this continues, but it's very heartening to see this from the federal courts. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you.